All right, you rowdy group, welcome to the, oh my God, seriously, city staff. Man, the finance department, take it in the hall. All right. Okay, we're just ready to get started after our crazy crowd. Welcome to the Asheville City Council work session. We have a budget document of our presentation for today was just posted on our City Council agenda right at the beginning. So if anybody's looking online and needs to find it, they can find it there. And I don't have an agenda for this meeting other than the PowerPoint, which indicates that it will be led by our city manager, Deborah Campbell.
All righty. So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We have a lot of information that we're going to cover today, particularly related to providing you with a update on the status of the budget process. Coming off the heels of your council retreat. We're going to share information on some resource alignment with your strategic and ongoing priorities, and we hope to receive some direction on some of the key strategic priorities and resource allocation. So what that essentially means in terms of those three goals is that we're going to provide you with information, particularly with an attempt to have your strategies align with your resources. And you have a document that is a hard copy, and I don't know if you all have that in the audience, but it is a document that has your strategic initiatives that you identified at your council retreat, and then there is the last column says resource alignment. So we tried to provide you with information just to make that strong linkage. And if I could go back to the first slide, and that's okay, but that first slide said March Madness. This is really not going to be maddening for you all, I hope, or for the community. It is obviously a basketball analogy. We have several more meetings that we will have with you to, again, update you on our progress. And this is one of those meetings where we will be seeking, again, your direction on particularly some options that we'll provide for you related to your strategic priorities. And we'll obviously talk to that. Barbara Whitehorn is going to do the bulk of the heavy lifting on this discussion, and I will be interjecting, and I hope she doesn't mind if I take the liberty to interject on some of the slides. But with that, I will turn it over to Barbara. And we do have, because this is a long presentation, we do have opportunities for you all to ask questions. In a more formal way, we stop, but obviously ask us questions at any time. So thank you. Barbara?
Thank you, Madam City Manager. Barbara Whitehorn, Chief Financial Officer for the city. Our agenda will be talking about the fiscal health of the city overall, sort of regular season, where we've been, our alignment with community goals, council goals, and staff goals, general fund budget development, how that leads into general fund budget development, and then we'll be asking for your direction on service investments. And with no further ado, fiscal health. So financially, the city is in very good shape. I know often we come to you and we're like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money for this, we don't have enough money for this. We are in actually a very good financial place. We have policies that support good fiscal management with fund balances and investment policy, debt policy. We have long-term capital planning with both internal expertise and external expertise. And our decision-making when it comes to debt and long-term capital, everything is approved by the Local Government Commission of North Carolina, which is a really critical piece of financial management for North Carolina cities. It really ensures that we can't make the kind of decisions that sometimes you see cities make that land them in trouble. We have an award-winning financial and budget management department. The Government Finance Officer Association gives awards for Distinguished Budget Presentation, which is your budget document, and for Achievement of Excellence in Financial Reporting, which is for the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. We've been receiving the Distinguished Budget Presentation for 28 years, and the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, award for 38 years. We are a highly rated city. We have the highest bond rating that you can have, which is AAA. That was awarded by Standard & Poor's Investor Services in August of 15 and Moody's Investor Services in October of 17. What AAA means is that our debt, when we go out and sell debt on the market, if we want to issue bonds, that's debt, that it's considered prime investment grade investments for anyone that wants to purchase that. It's the lowest risk for the investor. It's the lowest interest rate for the people issuing the bonds, for the entity issuing the bonds. So that AAA really does save us a lot of money and puts us in a very high level that is shared with not very many cities nationwide. Cities' bond ratings vary from AAA to down in the low Bs, which is, sort of questionably safe debt. All right, so any questions with that? I don't have a question slide, but just wanted to go over that a little bit. So regular season, where we've been with the budget. Just to recap, we did a good deal of community and council information and work sessions. For council, we did those August through December of last year, and community budget information sessions were from the end of October through early November. At the community meetings, we focused on core service delivery, revenues and expenditures, challenges and limitations. We kept things at a fairly high level to give people an overview of what cities can do, what cities can't do, what kind of authority we have, and where our revenues come from. At the department presentations to council, these were deep dives into the department budgets. We talked about core delivery. That was our core service delivery, excuse me. That was the big focus there. We looked at financial trends, department goals, the challenges that we have in individual departments and as an organization as a whole. And then our council retreat. You all reviewed your strategic goals and defined timeframes and whether you thought things could be done short-term, 1 to 3 years, mid-term, 4 to 7, or 8+ years into the future. And then you prioritize those again. We talked about budgeting. Well, Tony did, and he said, budgeting, the definition is aligning resources with priorities, and math, which I thought was really clever. Go, Tony. So then he talked about our financial forecast, and we did a capital improvement program review. So any questions before we move forward?
Well, just a question for the public, actually. Sorry. Is this document that we just got handed, is it online somewhere for people?
It is online, and it is also out front on the table.
Okay.
Yeah. We made sure to provide it. I'm sorry, I meant to say that as soon as I got up here. I apologize to everybody that might want that.
Great.
Okay. So alignment, community, council, and staff. So every time we do a budget presentation to you all, I know you see these same citizen survey results. And the purpose from a staff perspective is to keep in mind that these are the core things that our community said they wanted. And then council priorities, this is a screenshot of what you did at the retreat. This is also reflected in the handout. This just doesn't have the alignment stuff that's in the handout. So from there, we have those big picture sort of goals and, for the community and the council. And then how do we move forward with general fund budget development? We have organizational...
Excuse me, Barbara, if I could, just one thing which I should have said in my introduction is that we're going to focus just on the general fund. On April the 9th, we'll come back and talk to you about enterprise funds as well as the CIP, or Capital Improvement Program budget.
Right. And for the public, the general fund is the fund that does most of the general city things like public safety, public works, the internal service support things like finance and IT and HR, and also DSD, development services, and planning, community and economic development. Enterprise funds are like water, stormwater, U.S. Cellular Center. Okay. So as an organization, when we're talking about the general fund, there were some themes that were identified in the department presentations. Capacity to meet our programmatic needs with existing staff, rising cost of service and project delivery. I think we've all seen that. Requests exceed the revenue that we're receiving. Our total department requests for 19-20, this coming fiscal year, were $10.8 million. That included plans, services, staff resources, most of which we cannot fund. We have a structural gap. I know this is like, I'm sure you all feel like we're a broken record on this. But one important thing about a structural gap is that it does not indicate that the city's fiscal health is at risk. What it tells us is that we have a gap between the growth in costs and the growth in revenue. This is very common with cities. You see it all over the country. So our structural gap is not unique. It's a struggle for cities everywhere, and every year everyone does the same stuff to try to meet the difference. So structural gap live. Right now, our base budget was developed assuming zero additional revenue, so that we could start from a good place. Our initial estimated gap in January was 1.8 million. We worked in January and February to refine that. We got to 1.4, and we think now the final gap that we cannot cover with existing resources without the Mission HCA money is 1.1 million.
So Barbara, that is for next fiscal year. That's for this budget.
Yes,
okay.
For fiscal year 19-20.
If we keep waiting, will it keep going down?
Probably not. Probably not. We don't anticipate that will get any lower.
Just thought I'd ask.
So we have updated Mission HCA revenue numbers from the county. The initial estimates that we received in the fall were that this coming year we would receive about $5 million additional dollars, and ongoing we would receive about $8 million. Those numbers have been refined by the tax office, and they now believe we'll get about 2.5 and 5. So that's significantly lower, which staff felt pretty good that we started our base budget from an assumption of no new revenue, which certainly helps us moving into a change like this.
So this is a little bit earth-shattering for news, just in case everyone out there is sort of like, what does this mean? We were initially told that the estimates were that top line, this year being a partial year, next year being full implementation. These forecasts are significantly lower now, and my understanding is accurate. And my understanding, for whatever reason, the earlier numbers were based on not just property located in the county, but also in the city, but outside of the jurisdiction for some reason. Not anything we did, but the numbers we were given were based on more assets than they should have been.
Yes,
Something to
that seems to
that
be the
effect.
case. So our forecast over time has changed only slightly. The structural gap still exists. It still exists in approximately the same place. This, of course, is a baseline budget plus Mission HCA. It is not baseline plus strategic investments. It's just baseline.
And so Barbara, this up here, we saw it at our retreat. There was a slide that looked like this. This is the same assumptions. It's just with the refined,
Yes.
or as the mayor said, more accurate HCA mission
Exactly,
dollars. Okay.
exactly. And do feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions. Thanks. Oh, and look, questions.
Since we already have.
Right. Anything else with that? All right. We will move on to more general fund budget development. We wanted to give you a second to kind of breathe after that, wonderful news. Our guiding principles. We thought this was really important to include to describe what we really looked at when we looked at strategic and operational investments. We looked at enhancing customer value, essential service delivery, and strategic alignment. And we looked at those things for everything, which is really pretty challenging. And that's going to be our methodology going forward, which I think should show council and the community where we align with the goals that they have and where we need to invest resources to make ourselves align better. So the budget, the base budget, is core service focused. It's a continuation. Y'all probably recall this term from last year. When we said continuation budget, we're not cutting services. We're not making significant additions. We have some adjustments for strategic priorities and growth, which is driven, of course, by growth in population, service demand, and costs. So included in the base budget is an increase in the local government employee retirement system. That's a required contribution by that state-run program. That was a significant increase this year. We have across-the-board pay increase of 2.5% and flat healthcare costs. And I just want to point that one out as a really huge deal, that we have flat healthcare costs. Everyone else is seeing double-digit healthcare cost increases pretty much across the board. But a previous council, about 20 years ago, embarked on the Asheville Project program, which is a disease management program, and it has enabled the city to spend more money on prevention and less money on like the big things, like for diabetes, for example. Spend more money making sure people are compliant with taking their medication and testing their blood sugar versus having to end up in a wheelchair because of an amputation later, you know? But it was a huge investment in 1997, and then we expanded it several times over the years, and that has paid off tremendously. We have healthcare costs that increase at a lower rate than almost any other city. So, I mean, kudos to that council, and kudos to y'all for continuing it, and you know, it's a big deal. So core service alignment. We wanted to make sure that you all understood when we're coming up here and saying, here's the general fund budget, and here's what we think, what we want to hear from you, and here's where we think we should do things, that we showed you where we currently are aligned with your goals. So H1, your H1 goal was invest needed financial and staff resources to address maintenance, new construction, and operational needs. This one aligns with all of those core services that the general fund does: public safety, sanitation, DSD, planning. All of those things really align with that, those key operational needs that keep the city going.
And that the majority of the budget actually goes to the
yes.
delivery of these services.
Thank you. That was a really key thing that Deborah reminded me to say, and then I forgot, was that the vast majority of the budget, we can't really quantify a percent, but it is certainly 3/4 or more, goes to core service delivery. Okay. Existing programs that are in the base budget that are aligned with council goals include your A5 goal, expanding the partnership opportunities with Asheville City Schools. We have the Kayla program. We have In Real Life also. Your goal D3 was market and implement down payment assistance and housing programs. That's a community and economic development initiative. We have a great deal of funds dedicated to that, from the Housing Trust Fund, the Affordable Housing Bond, and the Affordable Housing CIP. And the Affordable Housing CIP actually matches with a Federal Home Loan Bank program, so that $300,000 becomes $400,000. So we're trying to leverage money as much as we can to have the largest impact on people that need this kind of help. So new programs that we added to the base budget. You know, I said we didn't add a whole lot, we made some adjustments, but we did add these 3 things. Develop a business inclusion program to increase minority contractor participation in response to the disparity study. We, this year, are purchasing a software module called Vendor Self-Service. It will help us track and do outreach to MWBE vendors. It certainly doesn't meet that goal in its entirety. I don't mean to imply that, but it supports that goal, and it's something that is not expensive over the long run. And it's a software. Many of the softwares that have a vendor self-service component require the vendor to pay a fee. And when we evaluated these services, one of our key things that we said was, it cannot be fee-based, because we're trying to reach out to small businesses and historically underutilized businesses. The last thing we want to do is make them pay a fee to register as a vendor. So the reason we're purchasing this software is that is not the case, and it is one that seems quite robust in its tracking and will help us move in that direction. F3 was identifying opportunities to insource. We are insourcing, well, in the base budget, is insourcing a concrete crew for sidewalk repair and maintenance. That has an ongoing cost of about $37,000 a year. However, when we insource that crew, that contract is no longer limited. We have flexibility, we have better efficiency, and we can do more with an in-house concrete crew than we can do with a contract that is, limited to a certain amount, and we identify where they're going to go. So that gives us a lot more flexibility internally. And then your goal H6 was a classification and compensation study, and that is also added to the base budget. Okay, any questions before we move on to service investments? All right, I guess I was like super clear.
Barbara, I think, I don't know if this is the time for the question or not.
Please,
but,
go ahead.
So I just wanted to go back to the council's retreat. Our highest scoring strategy is implementation of recommendations for the transit master plan. And the figure shown out there is 1.2 million.
On the chart.
Yes, on the chart. I mean, I thought that was going to be could you tell me what exactly that covers? And
Yes.
is this
Actually,
fully implementing
yeah.
the transit master plan, or?
No, full implementation of the master plan is significantly more expensive than the revenue that we have.
Okay.
So we've been negotiating with our service provider and working out a plan to have route reconfigurations, more on-time performance. Do you want to add to that?
Sure, and we have some slides that
It's the next, yeah.
cover that.
That's coming up.
It's a great transition.
Too early.
Except that before we transition, can I go
Sure,
back?
can go back.
Sorry. So the H6, the classification and compensation study, again, as I'm looking at this sheet and how, so we as a council prioritize this pretty low. I realize that the city manager may and staff may classify this as higher, but how much, I mean, it's, again, we got limited marbles to play with. So I guess my question is, how important is this for this to happen this year? And is this a one-time?
It's a
Yes.
one-time.
It's a one-time.
It is a one-time, and it is extremely important not only that we do the study and analysis, but we also, in the years ahead, that we implement the findings of that study. What I've found as a new city manager is that, number one, the complexity of the issues that this community is facing, and particularly from a local government perspective, our ability to respond and meet those needs is challenging. And not only from a resource perspective, but even a recruitment perspective. If we were trying to recruit that talent in to help us because of the pay, it is very, very difficult to get more talented people into our organization. And so rather than artificially establishing salaries, we wanted to have a study that compares us with other similar sized communities that do similar sized, similar types of activities and job duties to make sure that what my gut tells me is actually what's happening in the market. We know that even Buncombe County has the ability to recruit our staff because they're paying higher wages. We just think that it's very critical, and I think that a responsibility, particularly that the city manager's office has, is to make you all aware of those challenges. And we think that this is one way that we can address the skill set and the pay and equity issues.
And so then, remind me what study we did just a few years ago that resulted in a significant readjustment of a bunch of salaries.
We did one in the police department.
That was just police?
Well,
No, we did a big
But
one.
It may have been,
We
could
did
I
a full
ask
one.
Peggy to
yeah.
come up and respond to that? And I think that what I heard also was, unfortunately, that study may not have provided the appropriate information or adequate information. And secondly, I don't know how much it was implemented.
Peggy Rowe, Interim Assistant City Manager. There was a study done prior to my being here, and so I can't really speak to the details of it. I can pull together the study and provide you with whatever information you want, because we do have copies of that. And that was, Kathy may have to help me, in 2015 or 2016, something like that. And my understanding is that it had some flaws, and it was not fully implemented. Now, that said, last year, we did make some modifications to some police compensation because of our competitive nature with Buncombe County, and we were losing a lot of police officers to Buncombe County, so we made some adjustments in their pay plan and also some adjustments to fire. But that was just for the public safety people and not for anyone else in the county. I'm sorry, within the city, with the exception of we did increase a few things that affected folks who are on standby, where we were paying a smaller amount prior to the changes last year. So that was a very limited scope that we changed, but the compensation study that Ms. Campbell is referring to was done in 2015 or 2016.
I mean, to me, that doesn't seem that long ago. Can we not take anything from that? Or do we need, so two questions. Number one, can we not use that and maybe make some assumptions about how things have changed? Or then number two, is there no, I mean, even in my industry, in the nonprofit world, there are national studies that then get broken down by region and then by size and by budget and all that sort of thing. So there's some benchmarking that's out there. What I'm actually thinking is I need to go into this business if cities have to do this every 3 to 4 years, because this is a great.
They should do it every, I mean.
It's what I do for
When I was in
Julie.
Charlotte, we did
It's
it
actually what I do for
annually.
them.
We're not paying you.
We did
Do you
a
need a
pay me to
market-
do this.
Do you
No,
need
I'm
a
not doing this for
partner?
free.
Yeah, right.
Nope.
There was a market study and I apologize.
I'm just making a joke. I was interrupting you, please. Yeah.
And a lot of things have changed in the since 15 or 16 when that was done. And I can't really speak to the study itself. I mean, we could certainly look at it, but there were a lot of flaws. So it seems to me that we're at a point where we really need to just redo the study and make sure that we benchmark ourselves against other similarly situated cities that have the complexity of the work that Ms. Campbell described, and also the cost of living that we have in Asheville plays a big role, and there are just a number of factors that we really need to look at and have an outside person look at. Now, that said, we can certainly maintain it as we move forward, We don't have to have a consultant necessarily come in every 3 or 4 years, but we need to establish the baseline, and then we can maintain it doing our own benchmarking from that point forward.
But the only other point I'd make on this was I mean, we have a new city manager who's coming in, who we've hired to essentially tell us and execute what we need to do. And what you're telling us, Ms. Campbell, is this is a top priority of yours in order to be able to execute on the services, the core services, and the strategic plans the strategic priorities that we're asking you to do, right?
Absolutely it is, and I would not ask for this to be done. Seriously, I would not ask for this to be done if I did not feel that it was necessary for us to get a good baseline and for us to be able to recruit the caliber of people that I think we need to add to our organization in order to execute the very, very challenging and complex things and issues that this community is faced with.
All right, back to Brian's question. We're going to get...
All right,
Yes.
so our service investments, we started out looking at our budget drivers. Our new estimated Mission HCA revenue is $2.5 million. The key investments that we felt like, okay, here are the things we have to cover, is an investment in transit and an investment in the structural gap. Transit, we, for $1.2 million, we can enhance the customer experience by route reconfigurations and addressing on-time performance and missed trips. That will also cover technical support that's for like developing the routes and making sure everything's working right, I believe. And then the maintenance facility study is also covered in that. So we get a fairly good,
Barbara, thank you.
group of things. For
Yeah, I was just going to ask maybe for a little more detail on the route configurations and what it means to address on-time performance and missed trips.
Sure, I have this, and evidently I don't have it. I had a list of all of the things that were identified from the master plan, and it's 2 columns of different routes that either need, the time will be, I don't know if the time will be extended, but some of the interlining that needs to take place, that would be the majority of the things that would be addressed through this route reconfiguration. And what we heard, I believe from the staff as well as from your transit committee, was that the on-time performance was the highest priority that they had for implementation of the plan. We certainly wish that we could implement fully the entire first phase of the plan, because I'm a strong proponent of transit. I think it supports lots of goals, but we just have limited resources. And we are trying to, again, do those things that have the most significant impact on the customer experience. How do we make it more convenient for the customer?
And when you talk about limited resources, is it that we have limited resources on the money side, or we can't implement everything because we don't have that much money, or we can't implement everything because we don't have the staff at both the management company and the city at this point to get where we need to go?
So I would say that internally, we certainly, City of Asheville, we need additional staff, but I don't want to hire that staff until we have a little bit more assessment of level of effort to implement the plan, at least the first phase of the plan. The second piece is, yes, our vendor, the group that is providing the transit service, they're going to have to gear up with more drivers and additional fuel costs. There's a lot of resources in the broadest sense that needs to be addressed in terms of implementation. And again, that definition of resources is very broad.
Okay, so just revisiting the structural gap that we discussed earlier.
Barbara, just on this real quick,
Yes.
the healthcare issue, so this is assuming there's no increase in healthcare. So have
Right.
we gotten from our carrier, I know we're self-insured, but have we gotten from our carrier essentially it's flat?
Yes.
So we know that baked in, so it's really going to be a question of utilization if that comes up. Okay, got it, thank you.
Okay. So what staff worked on for council was to create some investment options, all of which include covering the structural gap and investing critical funds in transit, because transit is the top priority. We divided the options into 3 categories: projects, plans, and staff resources, just to make it easy to follow. Each of the categories adds up to about the same amount of money. And obviously, you all can discuss and tell us if we're headed in the right direction, all of those things. So here's an overview of the things that we identified as being in alignment with council, staff, and community goals. This is just an overview, and I'll go into each area individually. So projects.
Guess you should have reminded me.
I know.
Sorry about that.
Silence your cell phones.
So in the projects, obviously at the top is transit and the structural gap. Small business training, small
I feel like the structural gap's like walking around somewhere.
I know.
It's like a little.
It's like a crocodile cruising around. Because you know I always do the crocodile thing, because I know everyone loves that. Investment in small business training, fire department small capital items that they need annually, and facility maintenance. And then I'm going to give you some details so that you understand
Oh, wait,
how it aligns.
you go back, just linger on that one more moment. So there's not numbers next to those other things because you're going to tell us about that later.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing the projects. See,
Oh,
they're all
you're ahead.
here
Okay.
individually, and I'm just giving you the
Okay.
projects
Gotcha.
first.
Mhm.
So the Small Business Inclusion Program, this is F1. This is a small business training program that would cost about $60,000 a year ongoing. It helps participation with MWBEs, trains them how to register at the state and federal level, I believe it is, but I don't want to speak to that in a way that doesn't make sense because I'm not that familiar with it. But that is a project that would be ongoing and addresses F1. Investing facility maintenance resources, that is specific to H1. $200,000 ongoing can be leveraged for about, that's like $2 million in debt, and if you go out longer, we can leverage more debt. It also can be a pay-as-you-go for facility maintenance, like roofs, things that we really need over time around the city. The third one was the fire department's small capital needs. Every year, the fire department requests things like defibrillators, new breathing apparatus, like things that they have to have. And we don't have a pot of money that is just dedicated to that in the budget. This would be establishing a pot of money for them to replace the things that need replacing every year without having to come in with a budget request for small capital items. So that's the projects. Do you have any questions about those?
I do. Why isn't H1 in the capital budget instead of?
It's both. We assumed that H1 was both because it's maintenance, new construction, and operational. So our interpretation of that was that you wanted us to support operations and capital.
Okay.
So I don't totally understand what that means. Does it mean this is the staff side cost of the project?
No, this is actually saying we would dedicate this to the capital program out of our operating budget.
Oh, okay.
We already have an allocation of about $5.9 million.
And we have other items we do that
Yeah.
for. I mean, we have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund every year has general fund
Exactly.
allocation. I see what you're
That's
saying.
right,
So you just put it in that category.
That's
Gotcha.
exactly. It would just move over to capital.
So this would help deal with the $330 million, is that
Exactly.
the backlog we have on capital?
Doesn't take a huge bite out of
Right,
it, but
but
you know,
that's
every
what- that is-
small
that's
piece
what it's there
helps.
for. That's what it's
Yeah,
there for.
exactly.
Got
Any further clarifications or questions on this one? Okay. Then we have plans. There were two plans that rose to the top when staff was evaluating requests, and that's the solid waste reduction master plan and the Haywood Page plan. The solid waste master plan is one of your long-term goals to reduce landfill waste. That is a one-time cost of $100,000, plus there would be contribution from the green revolving fund to cover the difference, because $100,000 does not get us a master plan. But, you know, it certainly gets us part of the way. And then B4, one of your goals that is a fairly high goal on your priority list is developing a plan for the use of the property at Haywood Page. We felt that $200,000 was a reasonable allocation for that.
I've got a question on this.
Is that the entire, is that the entire cost for the Haywood
Yeah, I thought we
Page?
already voted on it.
Wasn't it originally?
They
300?
estimated their work to be around 300,000 or 340,000
340.
for one site. That is very, very expensive.
It's a really complicated site.
Been there.
Well-
So what did we vote on?
No, we voted on her to go find some money.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
we actually
We
voted.
did not vote on it.
You-
actually.
yeah, the
We
vote.
said go look for it.
This
so
is one of those
that's
things
what
where
Deborah
we
came
vote
back
on,
with.
like, breathe in, breathe out, breathe, yes, every step of the way. Well, yeah, no, it's fine.
Well, and one of the strategies we did talk about was spreading it out over 2 fiscal years. So,
And that was what I was thinking as well.
right, right.
A first year and a second year. I don't know how much time, though, if they can complete it in a year and don't need 2 years. That was my only hesitation.
And I have a question about the solid waste master plan. So I know, I think someone from solid waste came to Stacy a couple of months ago and was suggesting, or was saying that they were requesting this master plan and an additional person and an increase in fees.
Right.
That would help cover the cost of both of those things. Now, we just voted on fees, and I forgot to ask or think about whether we voted on a fee that would in fact do that.
I'm going to go on record of saying I did not support the increase in the fee for this year. I really think that we need to have a broader discussion with the community about the fee, what it will do, what it will, how it will impact, and the impact it would have. If we go back to the principles, the principle of the customer experience, some of the things that this would fund, I just didn't see that this year. And I just think we need to go out and have more conversations about this fee and what it will do and the impact that it will have.
Okay.
Wait, to clarify the fee you're talking about.
It would be the solid waste fee for trash collection.
So just an increase in the current fee? That's what you're talking about?
It would
Okay,
not be a new
yeah.
fee.
That would help cover the cost of this plan and a new essentially a new recycling coordinator, I think. Is that right? That would actually help
I see.
implement.
Got it.
And we do have a couple of related positions in the people part.
But what we just did in finance was not a big increase. It was
That's
just
correct.
We
So
did
that's
It
what
was just a
That's
very, it was a
It did
small
not include-
incremental. Okay.
Yeah, we
I
didn't-
was just
that.
wondering if
We
I missed
didn't
something.
recommend
No, ma'am.
any
So
solid
all
waste
that's
fee
synced up.
increases this
Right.
year. The fee increases that are being recommended are in water and stormwater, and their estimated impact on the average household per month is 70 cents.
Right.
So I want to make that clear. We were very cognizant of the challenge of increasing fees on the community, and most of our fee adjustments are actually trying to align them better rather than, Ben Woody gave the example of charging someone grading in a residential place the same amount that we charge in commercial. So it was creating a fee that was specific to large residential grading that wasn't at the high level of a commercial fee. So it was trying to, balance our fees between residents and commercial. Okay, any further questions here? Okay, so staff resources. Here, there were 3 positions that we felt really rose to the top, and that was a sanitation code enforcement officer, a planner 3, and a sustainability coordinator. Those positions, the sanitation code enforcement officer would actually allow the current position that does sanitation code enforcement and graffiti. So those 2 are extremely challenging to have in one position. So what Solid Waste, what Public Works thinks is that they really need someone who's dedicated to going out and dealing with the sanitation issues, and someone who's dedicated to deal with graffiti. So that would be an ongoing $70,000 per year. The planner 3 would be a support position that would help develop corridor studies and planning for the UDO update. Obviously, that one position doesn't make the UDO update. Staff supports that process and determines how that's going to go on. That's $90,000 ongoing. And the sustainability coordinator would provide some capacity in our sustainability department, which, as I know you all are aware, is only 2 people right now. And they have a lot of goals for 2 people to try to, manage. That sustainability coordinator would be $80,000 ongoing. So then just kind of a recap. Here's the overview. And then for your consideration, we just thought, is there a category of investment or investments that best aligns with your short-term top priorities? And from that, we would leave it to you all to discuss this and provide us direction for the manager's recommended budget.
I've got a question on the small business training. We already have, and the city already funds, 3 organizations in town that work with entrepreneurs and people who run small businesses, people of color who run small businesses. So Mountain Biz Works, Carolina Small Business Development Fund, Eagle Market Street. Have we talked to those groups about helping us fill this gap? I mean, does the city have to do this service? It makes sense that we would have the tracking service. That's our job. But are there other groups out there that either are already doing this work or could, with very few tweaks, change what they're doing to work with the same group of people to get them into our pipeline?
I think that's certainly something we can discuss with the department. But I actually asked what were their needs, and particularly if we are going to be a bit more aggressive about creating a business inclusion program, this would help us, the resources would help us achieve that.
Yeah, we've just to put a point on it, we've got requests for $280,000 to fund that partnership that we asked these groups to come together and form 3 years ago, to specifically target this audience of entrepreneurs and business owners, to help them develop their businesses. So that would be my question about that.
Okay.
So these are clustered, these 3 options are clustered together.
Move them around.
Well, I guess, is there a significance in how they are clustered other than their?
It's really just for simplicity of describing them. Obviously, as council, you could say, we want to
You can
do
mix
fire
and match.
department, small capital,
Yeah.
and Haywood.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah,
And the,
Soup and salad.
right.
yeah, exactly.
the plans
Is a
are
buffet.
one time, whereas all the others are
ongoing.
going to be baked in ongoing.
Exactly.
Yes, and then, those are the
I mean,
only 2
just the
one-time.
100 and the 200, not the million.
Those
two
are
and
the
one.
only one-timer.
Exactly.
But Barbara, were there any staff on the transit aspect, was in that 1.2 million, and again, I apologize if I missed this, if you guys have said it, do you anticipate hiring anyone with that 1.2 million, we're leaving existing complement the way it is there?
Right now, we are not hiring a full-time staff person for the city of Asheville. Now, I'm certain that the vendor, our provider, will have to staff up as we do some of the route configurations, but not for the city of Asheville. You did see technical support,
right,
where we are asking a consultant to come in and look at our operation overall and help us with the contract negotiations with the provider, with the
but
vendor.
in terms of managing that contract, once all those are done, there's no, we either believe that we can do it in-house with the existing budget, or that's something that wouldn't happen until next year?
We think that we can do that in-house until next year. You heard Barbara talk about a continuation budget.
Right.
I really needed to get my sea legs in this budget process. I came in the middle of the budget process. Next year's process will be a little different, and there will be significant. We'll just let the process play out.
Right. Right. And so on that point, I mean, one of the just comments here that I would make, I mean, first off, this is very helpful to kind of see in this area, and I appreciate you all doing the projections, because I think those will be helpful. Hopefully, when we're done with this, we'll run them through the model and see what those will be as well, just so we can get a taste of what will happen next year. One thing, I guess, just coming from me here is, you heard Councilwoman Mayfield, I think, asking a lot of really good questions about, do we have to do something, right? And I assume that push is to say, to the extent we have things here that we could reprioritize, or if there's things that are going on, certainly coming from me, as you're going through this process, I mean, certainly you're getting your sea legs, you've been here for 4 months, if you're seeing projects that don't meet the 3 criteria you had for the general fund, right, the customer experience, et cetera, if you see things that we're not performing well, I mean, this is clearly something that it's within your capacity to do as a city manager. But I certainly would be in full support of you saying to us, look, we shouldn't continue with this, or we should reallocate staff in order to meet these priorities and do what we need to do on the core budget. So I mean, I hope you don't. I know you've got to figure this stuff out, but I hope that doesn't stop you even midway through the year to say, you know what, guys, like, this isn't working very well, and maybe we can put more money towards a certain area. I mean, certainly, if we're going to advocate for things, I would love to see a 3% employee increase instead of 2.5%. I know we're going to let the process kind of go through, but to the extent any additional dollars, $60,000 here, $50,000 there, if it can fund a plan or something else, I would certainly love to hear your perspective on what you think we might be able to do or not do more efficiently.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So you're asking us now to take a look at these and sort of indicate to you what we'd like to see prioritized with the limited resources we're forecasting.
Exactly.
That's essentially what we are asking. We are also asking, did we do a good enough job at the alignment? And what I've heard from staff with your previous budget processes is that the alignment with the strategic priorities may not have been as explicit as we've tried to do it here. So that would be a question: have we lined up things appropriately, and particularly as it relates to some of the items in terms of the one-time allocations and staff. I said earlier that we are trying to make sure I use the appropriate words, because I don't want to overstate where we are in terms of staffing, but I think for so many years we have been so lean, and we've stretched the staff to a point where I don't know that with our current staffing levels that we can provide the quality that this community expects of us or be as impactful And what I wanted from you all was to hear a direction. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I think you hired me to actually recommend a budget to you all, but I would love some direction. Particularly, again, since the additional revenue that we have to work with really is pretty much the mission money. There isn't another pot that's out there anywhere. So that's why you're seeing the information presented in the way that it's presented.
So, from my perspective, I mean, I realize that we're doing this on a, sort of broad scale. But what I'd like, kind of before I can pick and choose, I'd like to, get a paragraph on, well, certainly with the transit, I'd like to really understand what that $1.2 million is, kind of, and, in some more level of detail than I've seen. And kind of the same thing with all of these, like, sanitation, code enforcement. This just maybe, I'm not really sure what that means. I mean, I don't know what it, I mean, I understand graffiti, but I don't know what a sanitation code enforcement person does. And so I can't. And I mean, and I'm not saying right this moment, but I can't really
We
give.
actually have it.
there like a
We
video?
have resource slides. Where are my resource slides? Okay.
So while she is working with that, we actually had a whole lot more detail about each one of these initiatives or projects. But because the presentation just got so long, we have them as
Well,
resource
and,
slides.
I mean,
so
I guess.
we can go to them if you
I
need
guess for
to.
me, you don't have to do it like right now. I mean, if you can
We'll
just
get that
show
for
it
you.
to me later, then.
Absolutely.
But I don't feel like I have enough information to say to you right now, well, I'd pick this one and that one and this one.
We'll get that more detailed information for you.
I could say that I 100% support the sustainability coordinator position, if you need to hear that.
What I hear you saying is we've got a lot of internal staff pressures because we experienced cuts during the recession and we haven't really ramped up. We're not able to meet the demand in a way that we find dissatisfactory or we think our customers find dissatisfactory. And when I say customers, I mean the people of Asheville. So if you're recommending positions to me, and I see 3 positions recommended here, that would be a priority for me to help you make sure you're able to deliver the services we're asking you to deliver in the most effective way possible.
Sorry.
Then
I'll
same.
just
And
flip
now,
back and forth
now
so
the
you can't
choices
read
are
them.
not. So to me that I would emphasize that. I think I think we have prioritized transit. I do think some years we have an interesting, we try to advance transit every year and do it pretty methodically, and I think we've done a good job at that. We've wanted to do more than we either had money for, or sometimes it was a capacity issue. So I guess my only hesitation would be, is this $1.2 million going to go towards something that will enhance transit services that we have capacity to deliver next year? Or are we going to find ourselves in another one of these situations where it's like, well, we couldn't even really do all that this next year, so we really only need 500,000 or, whatever. And I'm not, if we can do it, great. That's
Mayor,
great.
we've been very careful to try not to do what you said, which is to overestimate, and that's why we look realistically at what can we do and then put a price tag to it.
Okay.
So Deborah, that's saying that if there was more money going towards transit, we would not have the capacity to do these things.
I would, yeah, that's the That's the opposite, right. If we put more money towards this, I don't know that we could achieve full implementation and meet the expectations.
This is what you're comfortable being able to deliver.
I am, and I didn't do this alone. This was in
Right.
consultation with the vendor, with the consultant that we're working with, as well as with the transportation department.
And when would some of these route reconfigurations, whatever that slide said, when would some of these changes take place?
Would probably not start until probably late or maybe early winter.
Okay.
Because again, we've got to have the vendor
Right.
gear up, and we've got to do the route, more detailed route analysis, and then put that service out on the street.
So January 2020 or late 2019?
Yes,
Something like
I would hope late 2019, and then launch in 2020.
But one of the issues too we talked about prior was we kind of have a decimated city attorney's office, right? We have a lot of vacancies in there. In terms of funding for those particular vacancies, is that funding there? So like,
Yeah,
like
that's
assistant city attorney, is that already into the budget already? So we don't have to add that to staff?
We don't, not for the city.
For the city attorney's office, so they've got a fair number of vacancies in there. I just want to make sure that
We have placeholder funding for the
That
city
we're not
attorney's office.
budgeting without the money? Yeah, we have the money in there. Yeah.
Right, so I mean, so just to clarify, the continuation budget, sort of, what created the structural gap for, is looking at all of our vacancies across the board and saying, we expect to fill those. Or
We do budget for
not
them
every single one.
completely, but then we have a vacancy savings estimate that we take like the overall salaries and reduce it by 1.5%.
Just
And-
based on
Yeah, and
us.
we've found that that's about right for the vacancy savings across the board.
So, but again, so to Councilman Kapoor's point, if there is a staff position, whether or not somebody's sitting in that seat right now, we would have,
It's in the
in the
budget.
continuation budget, budgeted for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is correct.
And so kind of the flip side of that, to the degree that we haven't had a lot of positions filled this year, is that, for instance, increasing our fund balance so that there might be, is there any additional money in fund balance?
Just look for some more money.
I'm looking for more money.
There's-
People know this about me.
The problem is that they'll show
Wish.
up, the folks will be there, and then you're going to have a deficit in the coming year. So there may be a savings there, but it's not really a savings.
We might know more later on.
Well, so my question is, are we anticipating an excess of revenue over expenses this year in a way that we sometimes have a little pot of money that's fund balance money that we can either leave in the fund balance or we can spend on usually one-time things?
We do not. We anticipate ending the year at 15.2%.
Which is where we
Fund
like to be.
balance.
Yes.
Okay, that was my question.
I asked Jessica Morris with the Transportation Department to come up just to respond to just a couple of the questions that were asked about transit in terms of services and when we could gear up. She feels that I may have overpromised in terms of doing something by winter of 2019. She feels more comfortable with January 2020, but I'm the optimist, but okay, go ahead.
But Jessica's like, well, but I have to deliver it.
If I got to do it, right?
Of course, we would do our best to do it as soon as possible. So what we have done to come up with this dollar figure is we've attempted to take the transit master plan, the first year's recommendations, which essentially asked for a 40% increase to service, and we've broken it down into pieces or packages is what I'm calling it, of service hours that we think would have the most impact. So the transit master plan called for a combination of route reconfigurations and things that would really help focus on improving on-time performance, as well as extending the hours of operation. So running later into the evenings or Sundays, So we split those two things apart and said service hour extension would probably be something we'd recommend to come later. And let's try and focus on on-time performance. So there are a number of recommendations in the master plan that focus on on-time performance, and it accounts for about 40 to 50% of the service hours that we would want that were recommended in the master plan. So what we have chosen are the top 2 packages of improvements that we think would have the most impact, that currently serve the most riders, that we would expect that those improvements would further enhance the ridership for those particular routes. And then there are some things that we will also do that don't have a cost, that don't have a cost from a service hour perspective, but might require us to move some stops, things that are very, very low cost or no cost that will also help contribute to on-time performance. So we'll implement as much as we can. There's stuff that we have to do no matter what in terms of getting ready, map reprintings, things of that nature on our side. And then on the contractor side, as Deborah mentioned, there's potentially 4 to 5 months of staffing up that they would have to do. And we're going to work with them on that. And we'll also have to go through a contract renegotiation process as well.
Can you give us what are those top 2
Packages?
things? Yeah.
Well, there's the purple package and the green package.
Fabulous. That's all I needed.
And we plan to show you all of this in more concrete detail. But we've got a package that's approximately 12,000 service hours that will create some crosstown routes for us and provide additional frequency over on Haywood Road. And then there is another package of improvements that's about a little less than 6,000 service hours that would create a better on-time performance for the western routes, the W1 and W2, by creating a new route for the Pisco View Apartments. Mm-hmm. So again, those are intended to really increase the on-time performance, and those are currently the routes that see the most ridership right now.
So thank you for back to input for the manager in terms of the options that were put up there. Maybe if you put them back up.
I'll just jump in. I agree with Brian on the sustainability coordinator. Also, big fan of adding the planner for the comp plan implementation and corridor studies. I think we really need to move on Haywood Page. I mean, this is an investment of $200,000 now, but you know, that it's just time. It's just time. We gotta do that. If we don't, we'll have to do over everything that we've done on this for over the last 5 years, and that's a waste of time and effort.
Do you think that, maybe Kathy, I wonder if the Haywood Page, given the concept that the task force came up with and what we're going to be asking a consultant to, since we're asking a consultant to design something based on the concept, I'm wondering if there are any partners that might help us fund this study. And I'm thinking specifically of the Tourism Development Authority, because there is kind of a public space component. Oh, we've already asked.
Kathy.
Could we ask them again? Like, really ask them?
The law right now prohibits them from doing anything that isn't construction. So
That's
even
correct.
the design feasibility piece is not allowed within the way the current.
Well,
And
you know,
we've
I-
asked them to check under
Yeah.
all their.
But I'll ask again.
And they are funding their own study right now around the TPDF fund. They're paying a consultant to do that, and so I would just hope there would be maybe a creative way to figure out how to find these revenues, but on that side.
And Mayor, I would hope that, again, depending on the cost, and this goes back to what Councilmember Mayfield said. Maybe we can do this in a way that it's extended over years, rather than, because could be 150 if it's going to be 300,000. Maybe it's 150 this year and 150 the next year. But I think Todd is doing his best to, the planning director is doing his best to negotiate with the team that was chosen to get us the best price.
I know we had also, or Todd and I had a conversation about whether there was anything in that scope of work that if we had additional resources in the planning department could be done in-house as opposed to, so maybe the combination of a new staff person would be, and that study would get it down to that level or some level.
And I certainly hope that we can start building more capacity in-house to do things, particularly related to planning.
But we'll need to staff it.
But we've got to staff up.
Right.
Excuse me, as to the question of does this align with the priorities? I mean, I mean, it clearly does. And so I appreciate this. And we may kind of quibble about some of the things or trying to find, may agree with something and you got to look at the total package. But by and large, I mean, this is the two things. It maintains and improves our core services and it addresses our council priorities. We may want more investments in those areas. But, this certainly, to me, and this is only my second budget, feels a lot more as if it's targeted towards where our priorities, at least our priorities as we articulated, have gone. And maybe that's as a result of us being a little bit more focused in terms of where our priorities are. But in terms of kind of an initial budget or concept to come to us, in my mind, it clearly meets those two criteria.
Do you, on the small business training piece, is that for not for
A person.
hiring a person?
It isn't. It's contractual services.
So I wonder if that too is the kind of thing that there might be outside funding to help assist with that. I mean, I'm thinking of the chamber or business networks who might be interested in helping.
And again, whether that's a bit of training that our existing partners can incorporate into what we're already doing with them.
Well, and if it requires some payment to contract out the services, can we find another resource for that? And on the fire department, small capital, I'm a little bit alarmed about not funding the purchase of defibrillators.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else is concerned about that, but that seems like we have to do that.
We have to do that.
Sometimes we hear about grant opportunities, lots of grant opportunities around fire. So I assume someone's already exhausted that because we routinely go after grant monies for fire. But that didn't seem optional.
Shouldn't be
optional. No.
And that's really to create almost a fund, right? That's almost to create like kind of a small, almost like mini placeholder for things.
Yes.
So they may use all of it in one year, may not use all in
That's
the other.
correct.
That's the concept. Just so there's money allocated there. On
That
an
is
ongoing
correct.
basis.
We want to create that fund going forward.
I can jump in and just say that without a lot of thought, I can definitely support the sustainability coordinator. And naturally, I would want to support transit. But, and I hear the staff member that came up and gave us good information, but I'm also looking in the audience, and we have a lot of transit advocates there, and a lot of times they give a lot of information about the history and even things that were promised last year to give a lot more insight. So I don't think I can make a decision right now until I hear from people who have really been involved in this from day one. I think that will help me kind of help inform a decision.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I also heard and met with the advocates as well around transit. And I know that there has been a rocky history, and it is a service that we have got to create both the staff as well as the infrastructure to actually operate a transit system in this city. We've got a lot of work to do in that area, a lot. So,
This is it. This is, I know, Barbara, you're going to put up a slide that shows us next steps.
yep.
Maybe. I thought I saw one in there.
You did.
Yeah.
Because you know me. There we go. Here's our budget calendar going forward. Obviously, today was the general fund budget development and discussion. On April 9th, we have a work session that will be capital and the enterprise funds. Also on April 9th is the adoption of fees and charges at your regular meeting. The proposed budget presentation will be on May 14th. And May 28th is the budget public hearing, and then adoption is June 11th.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments for the manager, for Barbara? Otherwise, we'll.
I don't know that anybody called out that facility maintenance line item, that 200,000, but I sort of get the sense from you that we should really sort of have to do that.
Yes, included in the transit one? Is it?
No, sorry, that the 200,000 under facility maintenance. That's sort of like the fire department. It's like we should do this.
The staff and I have debated, and I would suggest, yes, it would be a good practice, yes.
Okay. And so.
And we wish we had
A lot more.
Much more.
Yeah.
So that we provide you the information that you want, would you like a small memo on each of these items detailing what the impact would be? The customer service?
I mean, it may not, for me, it doesn't need to be per se a memo, but I guess I would like a paragraph or two, just saying like, well, if we hire this or do this, this is what we can get done next year, or.
And that's something that the departments have pretty much already put together, so it would just be taking that information and reformatting it, so it's not.
As part of the budget request.
Right, yeah, because, just to, I think to everyone's point here, there's none of these items that we would say, oh, we shouldn't do that. You didn't throw up any, this doesn't include the wish lists that are out there, that we know are large levels. These are.
The 10.9
Exactly.
requests.
There's millions of dollars out there that we could spend. So, I don't think, for people listening to this, all these various items, they're all very crucial, and it's just a matter of figuring out which are the most crucial.
That's right.
The only other thing I would add at the end here is some years I will hear from, and we will hear from staff or other people in the community who will say, well, council cut whatever it is. And what happened is up through the department requests to the manager came a variety of things that never made it to this meeting.
That's correct.
And we didn't know. It wasn't that we cut it. They just never made it to the manager's budget. So if there are any particularly contentious items or ones that we're going to need to know a little background on that didn't make this year's budget, there's a whole bunch of stuff that didn't make this year. Obviously every year that's true, but they're not necessarily contentious or anything like that. So if there's anything out there that we might get asked about that we'll need to know some information about, that would be helpful to me. I know we've struggled in the last couple of years absorbing some of the firefighters' requests that came in after this process had already happened, but some of them were a continuation of asks that predated our council entirely, and picking that up on the retirement benefits. And the turnout gear, there were some other things. So I'm just thinking of things that we didn't discuss, but we didn't know we weren't discussing, sure. In other words.
One other request I have, this is more for the capital improvement. We're going to be talking about funding. I know about that on April 9th. One of the things I think, Ms. Campbell, you've talked about, and I certainly agree with, is a concept of trying to think about how do we fund these in the future, sort of like ongoing bond type of. If that's something that will be part of that discussion, or even kind of touched upon, how important that is in terms of funding, that'll be helpful, because that'll help us sort of tie back to this. And certainly that would have an impact on any debt service in the future, but if that's going to be part of it, great.
All right,
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you all. We appreciate the feedback.
Okay.